Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to MediaScope's live Friday chat. This afternoon, I'm really pleased to be joined by Chris Vance from Starcom MediaVest Group. Is that the right
That
title?
Is correct, yes.
Good. And your role there, Chris?
I run Strategy and Solutions, which is our strategy, planning, and research team, kind of all combined.
Very good. So therefore, you are exactly the right person to talk to this afternoon about the Media Futures Report.
Absolutely.
2016. And I believe you mentioned to me when we spoke on the phone yesterday that this is the 31st report.
It is, yes. So Media Futures began 31 years ago. And I think from the beginning, it's been meant to kind of look at the market landscape, look at media trends, look at how spend is changing. And then every year or two, we kind of add something new to it, add a little bit of a new direction. So yeah, I think one of the things that a lot of people have commented on this year is just how very different it was from previous years.
That would be interesting to talk about. I mean, first of all, I'd really like to get a sense of how the report's put together. I think we interviewed something like 150, I could be wrong on that figure, marketers, agency and publisher. So interesting to get an idea of the methodology of the report first.
Sure. So we've talked to 135 marketing professionals. So it was pretty much an even split between marketing people and media publishers. And it was brought in through a few different ways. Through the AANA is kind of our big sponsor here. So we leaned on them fairly heavily. And then just through other connections. And then we did some pretty in-depth interviews with some of the key media publisher, sales directors, national business managers, just to get kind of their lens on the marketplace as well. So it was important for us to have as much of a quantitative view as a qualitative view to really dig into that insight.
So they're face-to-face interviews, Chris, are they done online? How are they actually facilitated?
No, it's because of the group we're talking to here, it's kind of whatever worked best for them. We had a mix of face-to-face, phone interviews, live in-persons, and it's just what worked best. We fielded the survey over December and January, so you tend to be as flexible as you possibly can when you field research over that period.
Absolutely, and as I'm someone who constantly is coordinating people, setting meetings up, setting things up like the live chat, very difficult to coordinate a group of people.
Totally.
35 marketers, impossible. So let's have 31 years we mentioned, and I know that obviously you've not been involved in the report for 31 years, Chris. You probably weren't even born when the first one was put out.
I was, so that's good.
And I recall my old boss at Conahan and May, John Lambert, being very involved in the report. And that would have been, my goodness, 25 years ago. So yes, I've known of this for some time. So perhaps something interesting to look at, a 31-year-old report, is getting a sense of some of the changes over time. Because I think that's a really interesting reflection of what's been going on in our industry.
Well, I think what's most interesting about that is that in the 31 years, probably the first 10 years, 15 years of the report, because the market was changing so quickly from a paid perspective, you saw far more, I think, massive shifts in the paid trends over that time. I think in the last 5 years, we've seen moderate shifts in paid. So the real story kind of comes into, so if the shifts in paid are so moderate, what's actually happening, since we know the industry is changing so much? And so that's where you've had to dig into the earned and owned and infrastructure, and looking at areas like that where even traditionally a media report may not have gone in the past. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, would a media agency have done a report centered around customer experience? I don't know. But I think it's interesting to see that that's where the shifts have started to go, to where marketers are seeing media investment really start to impact those areas.
Absolutely, and I think it's really interesting too. The last 5 years perhaps have seen more change than we have in the previous 20. And you're right, all of a sudden paid, owned, earned. I mean, sometimes people put an S into that and call it social.
Yep.
just as another sort of term. I mean, social to me can perhaps fit into the paid owned earned silos. I agree. You know, it's really caused huge disruption to our industry because our industry has been very based on the paid media market. So, yeah, interesting to see a major agency like yours starting to talk more openly about some of those earned and owned channels.
Yep.
To say the least. And yes, you know, there has been a lot of talk about the increasing importance of owned. And certainly the report this year, Chris, really highlighted customer experience. And I've noticed that seems to be the word on everyone's lips. Maybe that and influencer marketing seem to be, you know, the big things that are kind of coming in.
Yep.
One could argue that they're very aligned, those two things. But perhaps, first of all, if you can give us, and that customer experience really came out through the report.
Yes.
Let's get a sense first, what do we mean by customer experience? We hear it a lot, but what does it mean?
So it's a really interesting question because we actually asked our marketers and our media publishers that as well, was to give us their definition of customer experience. And I have to say the definitions kind of ran the gamut. You'd have the definitions that were really functional and kind of very deep and technical, so that, you know, they talk about every aspect of the customer journey and how we serve content along every aspect of the journey. And then you'd get definitions that were very kind of philosophical and really esoteric around, you know, delivering a brilliant brand story to the customer as they move through a seamless experience. And we get such a range of answers that I think what's interesting is that there was no one clear definition. There was no kind of succinct definition that came out of the research. And where we see that going is that because it's such a personal sort of thing to your business, the definition almost has to be reflective through the lens of what your business delivers. The definition that we gave people through the report after we asked them for theirs was the seamless end-to-end experience, how you talk and interact with people along that journey. So that was how we set it up very broadly. But I think it's less about what it means to the category and more what it means to the individual business.
That is a great answer, and I think that, you know, when that same question is asked about content marketing, it's a very similar answer. It seems to mean a lot of different things for different people, and content, of course, can be used in so many ways. But I agree, it's up to each business to work out, you know, what's going to impact their customer the most, and apply it. You know, like any media over time, Chris. You know, it's all about the customer. The customer is the North Star at the end of the day, and it's great that we've now got all of those tools beyond the paid advertising realm to really touch those customers. Perhaps now, if we just have a look at some other findings in the report. So we've touched on customer experience, which was the other findings in the report. Chris, can you give us some insights into that?
Yeah, so we still looked at kind of the paid investment. We looked at where people were seeing the shifts kind of coming in from a paid versus owned and earned perspective. And not surprisingly, we saw that the trend is staying pretty consistent kind of year on year. The market's looking around a 2 to 3% growth in investment. And the difference between media and advertisers really wasn't significant either in that area. There were a few channels that were pretty interesting and kind of the discrepancies between that. So outdoor was one where the outdoor industry expected a far more of an increase than the advertisers. I think this year that a few of the reasons behind that could be that marketers may not be aware of the full scope of services of some of these providers right now. So the publishers are very excited about new offerings that are going to come out this year. And even the media agencies are excited about those offerings, but marketers may not be as across those yet. So they may not see that investment potential there because of that knowledge. I mean, we saw our finding that media owners, publishers felt kind of disconnected from the overall strategy of the business. They don't really feel they're getting the connection to marketers as they would like to have. I think that could be systemic of that issue right there. But we also always tend to see publishers be a bit more bullish than advertisers when it comes to that investment.
And I'd like to deep dive into that a little bit. One of the things that really came out, I mean, a few things there that you kind of touched on, but one of the, yes, outdoor really surprised me as well. I mean, that is the boyish media channel in that paid media category. And of course, outdoor benefiting hugely by technology that is anything enhancing their offering, where so often we're seeing technology cannibalizing an offering in the paid media space. And outdoor, really getting their act together in terms of measurement. There's a tender due now from the OMA to have a measurement and a trading system in place. So some good things happening in that area. But the report did touch on that disconnect, perhaps between publisher, agency and marketer. And yes, that could really go part way to explain the difference in the outlooks there.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, we've seen that outdoor is investing hundreds of millions of dollars in new technology over the next, I'd say, 12 to 24 months. So I think that when the pace of change and innovation for them is moving so quickly that it's selling that story, doing a better job of selling that story to marketers, that I think falls on both agencies and the publishers to make sure that it's a little more consistent. I know that one of our panelists from Sydney, Arno, said that it's going to require us to look at planning and connection planning and media planning in a different way, because we're going to need to be able to articulate new roles for those channels along that journey because of the new technology that's enabling them to kind of serve different needs. So I think we're probably going to see conversations around planning, what that means for how we bring clients into that journey, and also what it means for everything from briefings to meetings with publishers to how we involve them more holistically through the process. It's going to be an exciting time, I think, over the next 2 years.
I think so too. And, that disconnect between the three pillars, again, in our, I suppose, our media trading process, that has been a long-going issue. Media agency, publisher, marketer, often they feel like there's a disconnect between each of them. There's a lack of communication. That's certainly been going out for a really long time. So it's exciting that marketers are really recognising that they perhaps like to know more.
Yep.
In a busy market where it's really difficult to get people involved and so on, it's how do we bridge that? And it's a very fragmented market. I mean, literally, if you open your doors to all the media owners, that's all you would do in your day. Plus all of the new things that are continually coming into the market. So, it's a challenge. It's been a long-term challenge. It's an ongoing challenge, but it's great that marketers have kind of recognised what's going on. That outdoor, again, really stood out to me. One of the other key things that really came out was you recognise the need for media to up their game in terms of personalisation and also in terms of the tech that they're using. And I really wanted to get some deeper insights into that, what you meant by that, how those findings came out, how they would benefit, and indeed, Chris, if there are any examples of a media owner or a publisher that is doing the right thing there.
Yeah, look, the interesting thing about that finding was those were the media owners' perspectives on themselves. So I think it's interesting to see that they felt that those were the areas they needed to focus on. But it does make sense if you think that 50% of them feel disconnected from the overall strategy of the brands they're working with, then they're going to double down on the technologies and the platforms that are going to allow them to be competitive in the future. As we saw, the investments across paid media channels of mass channels in the tune of over $315 million over the next few years. That's significant investment. We think that everybody, a lot of the key publishers are actually moving in the right direction. So AdShell Smart Panels, the investments that 9 and 7 are making, and 10 in their programmatic offerings. So they're moving in the right direction. I think what that's going to require is that once the tech's in place, and because I think that's what this year is, and probably a bit of next year for marketers and publishers, is that kind of year of building infrastructure. It's once that's in place and we're ready to kind of switch the light on, how do we work together? So then how do we bring everybody together? And I think that's what the role of the agency will be in facilitating that kind of new world of interaction, that new world of bringing channels together so that it's a lot more intelligent from beginning to end. I think there are key standouts in probably every channel. It's really exciting for us to see that everybody's taking this seriously. In the US, 5 years ago, there were still lots of publishers who would keep their head in the sand and say, no, this isn't coming towards us. We're big and we'll be fine. Whereas I think the Australian market is reacting to this far better and far more quickly.
And that really came out at a conference that I was at during the week, and I'll touch on that towards the end when we talk about media news of the week. But it really came out that the Australian market, I think we underestimate that we're doing okay. We're quite sort of on the curve in terms of technology. We're quite up to speed in terms of education. Skill shortages, of course, a huge issue, but that's across the market, probably globally, and I do want to touch on that a little later. But yeah, publishers do seem, as an industry, we do seem to be finally having a very honest conversation about where we are, and about, the moves that we need to make to future-proof ourselves. I think the thing about turning the button on with the tech, Chris, is that button, you're in perpetual beta.
Yep,
everyone
absolutely.
Is, which is really exciting, but also really challenging. When I first started in online in the mid-90s, you launched your site, you kept it there for about 8 years until you basically relaunched again. It's not like that anymore. And I suppose tech also can do something that publishers all really need to do now, which is diversify revenue streams. So advertising is one revenue stream, and certainly keep that going, but there's now a myriad of ways that you can really diversify those revenue streams, multiple device touch points for users or consumers. It's a really exciting time. Still a tough market though.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that it's going to influence how we start to evaluate publishers and partnerships as well in the future. That data partnerships, new measurement opportunities, all of those criteria, I think, will rise in importance of kind of helping us determine which publishers to use for a solution, which partners to bring into brief responses. I think in the past they've been nice to haves, so they've been kind of things to help us feel a little more secure, but in the future, those will probably rise to the top as being key criteria for how we decide which partners to work with.
That is a really interesting point, Chris. And tell me, those partners, just having a think about it, does it need to be the larger end of town, so the major publishers, or can it be a small niche publisher that perhaps has a very engaged audience? Are you asked to scale, or is it more that engaged?
That's a great question, and that came out in the I think the panel discussion in Sydney, where we talked a lot about who are the sales directors, who are the media, who are the people that are going to be most influential in the future. Will it continue to be the leading publishers, or will it start to be the startups or the smaller, more niche publishers that just have a far more engaged audience? And I'm going to take the cop-out answer, which I actually believe in, which is both. I think you're going to need a healthy mix of both. And that's something that we're starting to see across the board, this need to bring in some of those smaller, more nimble publishers to be able to help you kind of attract those audiences. But I think the big publishers are taking notice of that as well, and diversifying their own services into those smaller areas. So we're going to see more consolidation, I think, of larger publishers kind of picking up some of those smaller ones over the next few years as well. I know agencies are doing it right now too. Why bother? Why spend the investment building something new if there's somebody out there doing it so well who you can actually help scale yourself? Yes, and
there's a lot of talk about this is a year of consolidation, and you're right, that's in our own landscape. Our own sort of media agency landscape, but also in the media owners or publishers. Beauty Heaven would be an example. I think HIP Pages, another really good publisher, was recently picked up by one of the majors. So definitely seeing some movement there. And certainly some of those smaller publishers would be very pleased to hear what you just said, Chris.
Excellent.
Because I think they do find it sometimes difficult to be part of that conversation, even though great or really good audiences. So it's good to know that, our very diverse market is being looked at. We are a very fragmented, deep market with some really good audiences beyond those mainstream publishers. Yeah,
I completely agree.
Absolutely. But, the commonality, I suppose, is the audiences. And now you're saying the tech and being easy to deal with, easier to buy and sell. Let's touch on something now that I think is a really big subject that came across. And, it's a subject that is brought up constantly at every event that I go to. It came through to me very loudly in some information I read about the report. And that's skill shortages.
Yes.
Such a huge issue. I don't think we've cracked it yet. I think there's several industry organisations and businesses trying to. We all recognise it's a problem. What came out of the report in that regard to you, Chris?
Yeah, so it was interesting because the report touched on it in a few areas, but then the panel discussions, which I'll explain, went into pretty deep debate. I'd say in both Sydney and Melbourne, we saw quite a bit of debate from our panelists. I think from a report standpoint, what we're seeing is that balance of kind of specialists and generalists. So marketers looking for people with deep knowledge in tech, deep knowledge in some of these skills, but still needing to have that broader business sense or broader sense of communication. So I think the sentiment seemed to be that we're getting people with very deep knowledge, but maybe they don't have the same soft skills or the same level of, I think, maybe business acumen that they probably need to be successful. And that's going to fall on us to fix that gap, because I don't think you can expect universities to do to be able to do everything. We had Dr. Karen Nelson-Field from the University of South Australia on our panel, and she said the one thing that universities really need to start thinking about, though, is what do those programs actually look like? What does a marketing program of the future? What doesn't, does it start to blend engineering and data science and all of these things into it so that we are creating more well-rounded students, well-rounded professionals for the future? I'd say, if I was being completely honest right now, I think we're still in a period of trying to figure out the future for ourselves, that it's really challenging then to kind of tell that next generation what the skills are they need to have to be able to kind of make it there. I think that it's that need to be a self-starter, that need to be hungry and passionate and curious, and all those things we always say are important are probably have never been more important, because the amount of knowledge that you kind of need to teach yourself or glean from the world around you, I think is increasing. I mean, I know that when I'm looking for new candidates, or if I'm looking to hire someone, that passion and that curiosity, that's what I look to before I look to any technical skill, because I know we can probably give them some of those here.
And I hear that so often in the market, is that it's not necessarily the hard skills, it's more the soft skills that employers are looking at, because the hard skills are the relatively easy thing to learn. I wonder also, Chris, if that person with those harder technical skills, plus the business skills, plus the soft skills, is that a unicorn? Do they exist?
Yeah, look, I think that right now they probably are unicorns. Hopefully in the next few years we'll see we'll see more of them, because I think they will be the future of our business. I think it's going to require us to look at those younger, hungrier candidates, though, and realize that we need to train them differently as well. We can't expect younger, new talent to conform to the old models of how we've been trained or how we expect them to learn. That's just not how it operates anymore. So those technical skills, I think in the past we'd say, oh yeah, that's pretty easy, we can teach you those. But now some of those technical skills are really complicated, but also it's not just the one skill, it's the convergence of 3 or 4 of them together that they need to have a more holistic understanding. So that's where I do think our training and education model needs to flip pretty dramatically. And it's great though to hear that people like Dr. Karen Nelson Field recognize that and are starting to do some work on that themselves. So I have hope for the future there.
I do too, and I actually hosted on Wednesday night after the Programmatic Summit a professor and a doctor from the Queensland University of Technology who have recognised, programmatic is a space that they want to put a lot of emphasis in terms of course production or course outline on. So yes, it seems to me that the unis and the colleges and so on are, getting their head around where the skill gaps are and where the skills are that our industry actually needs. Just a question though, and something that, does again come up often, data scientists, engineers, do we, if they come into our industry, do we look after them well enough? And that's something that comes up. Would they prefer to go to finance or another sort of industry sector that needs those skills just as much as we do?
It's a great question. I know that our own data and analytics team talk about that often. I think it's more that we need to have a level set of expectations more upfront. I think it's going to require the industry to engage universities a lot earlier in the process, but also change how we recruit from those types of programs. Those candidates will actually help us build the better departments for the future. I think it goes back to my original point of, I think we need to allow them the space to grow and the space to actually reverse mentor us a bit in how those things should be, how those skills should be structured, how those skills should be best used, because our industry is still pretty young in how we're incorporating them. And I think that, if we continue to try to put them into the old context, then they will get frustrated and move on. I think it took a while for us to, when we originally brought in data and analytics offerings into the agencies, we kind of went through that same cycle, and we're probably finally getting, on the other side of that, to where we need to just kind of look back to how we approached those things, because I think we can learn quite a bit.
And I love that sense of reverse mentoring. I think there's an enormous amount that we can learn from younger or newer people coming into the industry. What about retraining existing people in the industry, or maybe people coming back to the industry after some kind of hiatus? Is that do we have the program in place to facilitate that? Or I think we could do it.
Yeah, look, I think it's it's something that will be very important for us, because I think that the diversity of talent is never going to be more important than it is now, or it will only become more important as we go on. So diverse perspective will be an agency's secret weapon, or the industry's secret weapon in the future. I think it's more finding out where people currently are, and then being very clear with them on where not only they need to get to, but where they want to get to. I know that on my own team, I have such a diverse mix of talent, and that's that kind of training of each other, that osmosis that kind of happens of just having people working together from diverse backgrounds. I probably learn as much from my most junior people as I do from any conference or any event I attend of my peers. So I think we just need to look at talent more holistically, and how we kind of bring that diversity back to the forefront.
Yes, and I'm very active in saying, look, I think we just need people who have a passion for the industry, a passion for learning, and a passion for understanding, keeping on the curve. There's still some Luddites left in our industry, Chris. They need to get on the curve. And it's exciting on the curve. It's very exciting on the curve. Never a dull day. But
no.
Something that someone said again at this programmatic conference, it was actually Hayley Cameron from SBS, who you may or may not know. She said, there isn't a day that goes by where something doesn't come in and I go, what? And she says, what is this? And I thought finally some honesty. It is, we're very much out of our comfort zone. We're all learning this together. No one knows everything. Let's just be a bit more honest and ask some questions now and then. It's a new industry.
Yeah, look, I agree. And I think that we saw that in the report as well when we talked about marketers saying that customer experience was the most exciting thing for them, but then only 6% of them felt they were doing it well. And the reason the most said that they weren't doing it well was complexity. I think the fact that things are changing so quickly, people are needing to learn new skills every day, every other day. There's a sense of excitement, but also fear of the unknown that we probably haven't had as much as in the past. So that's where diverse skills, bringing people in who can kind of see that bigger picture, will probably be what will allow marketers to start to address some of those challenges in the future.
Absolutely. And that's where, again, speaking about those soft skills, communication skills become very important.
Absolutely.
To get the message across, to sell your product in, to explain how it works. And, I know a lot of the vendors that I speak to, that's something that they recognise very early on, that part of their role is going to be educating their selling market, or the market that they're buying, they're selling to.
What I think was interesting about that was a direct quote from one of our publishing partners was around the fact that they wish marketers would let them in on their products as they're being developed. So keep them consistently informed of the products they're developing. But I think that can work both ways. I think it's going to require us and publishers to keep marketers consistently aware of products and solutions that are happening. I think marketers are innovating so quickly, publishers are innovating so quickly, so are agencies, that we oftentimes, we're losing sight of making sure everybody's aware of the right innovations at the right time, because we're all just moving so quickly. Stopping and taking a breath, I know, is probably the most challenging thing for any of us to do now, but will probably pay dividends when you think about some of the communication gaps that we see in the market.
Absolutely. And I suppose as a media agency, you're directing your client at what media opportunities to look at in a very fragmented, noisy, crowded market, where, again, coming back to, they could spend all day long just seeing media businesses coming in. I do think we'll see more consolidation here. Indeed, I'm starting to recognise that already, but, the market is moving and evolving. I was saying to someone earlier today, the digital MediaScope that I've now had done since 2010, influencer marketing and customer experience seem to be the two big topics that are real. There's more vendors coming in on those categories, so it never stops, to say the least.
No, never.
Keeps us interested. Chris, let's now move. Is there anything else that you can share on the Media Futures report before we finish up? Is there anything else you'd like to share? And I'll highlight it also in MediaScope's newsletter next Friday to make sure everyone gets it downloaded.
Well, I think the only thing I'd like to add is that, we know that this is a topic that, as you said, right, this is a topic that everybody is talking about right now. And so what we're going to do is dig into a piece of the topic every month and release kind of an update on the report every month in a certain area, mainly because we know that, in the past, we've kind of done Media Futures twice a year. You do a beginning of the year, then you do a check-in, but this is something that's going to require, I think, a little bit more depth than that. So we'll be providing updates over the course of the year. I think the first area we want to look into that came out of quite a bit of the panelist discussion was agency role. So what's the agency role in terms of developing and helping with customer experience? Right now, marketers seem to think that technology, so being kind of the technology support, the infrastructure support was one of the key focuses, but I think that's going to start to expand as we move further through the year. So that's something that we'll be releasing to the market as well.
Excellent. I really look forward to that, Chris. I will send you over a digital and programmatic MediaScope after we've finished here. That might help you navigate the market.
Excellent.
In a little way. You can put that behind your wall for our next
Excellent. Yeah, I'll put it up right here.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. I'll pay you later. Let's move on to news of our media week. I think we've already had a little chat about this prior to our live chat today. To me, it's all been about media reform, and I don't want to get onto a rant too much, but I'll touch on a little bit. And of course, I also attended the programmatic summit, so I'll touch on those things. But Chris, for you, your week this week, what sort of caught your eye?
Well, one big thing that caught my eye, and I know it's because of a client, but also a personal interest, was Activision Blizzard, a massive video game company in the States, buying King.com for over $5 billion. And I think what we're going to start to see there is just these mass kind of traditional publishers like an Activision Blizzard, who are very computer game and console based, doubling down on mobile gaming. And I think we're going to see a lot of the influence of kind of the behaviors of the Asian markets, where mobile gaming is probably a much larger phenomenon, start to trickle more into the West. It's going to be interesting to see how the role of mobile shifts, with companies now starting to like monolithic traditional companies starting to see the importance of building their audience in those platforms. I know it's interesting to think of a video game company as a traditional business, but they're really starting to branch out. And I think it's a signal for a future of probably more diversification in that space. When you think about programmatic offerings as well, the ability to be far more targeted in those with that type of content in a way that we've probably never been able to do before, to half of the population of the world who play these games and interact with these technologies. My head is spinning at the possibility there.
Very exciting. I mean, again, hear more and more about how do we. I mean, it's almost like you want to advertise through those channels without being advertising. And you can't be intrusive. That's just going to turn the audience off. So how that will actually manifest and look is going to be really interesting. Out of interest, would you put that in the paid, owned, earned category, advertising within mobile gaming?
I think it could be all three. I think it actually depends on your entry point into it. I know that Samsung had a lot of success in the past with custom Angry Birds levels, for instance. And while that would be paid, there's also the earned potential of people sharing those and then that becoming an asset for Samsung in the future. I think what's going to be very interesting is that gaming has been an area that advertising has still been fairly clunky and fairly heavy-handed in the past. So when we think about customer experience, a large acquisition like that for a major gaming publisher, it's going to allow brands so many new opportunities for how they start to move across that journey. I mean, one of my strategists on my team, this is a big passion area for him, and he's already started to think about the models that could be built out of what that looks like for the future. So it's going to be an area where when we think about how customer experience changes, I see gaming as being a big player in the future.
And with that, again, that North Star of customer experience, hopefully that will dial down the intrusion that advertising, that trap that advertising can fall into now and then.
Yeah, I agree, because if you look at how gaming has been used in the past from an advertising standpoint, I mean, we'll make this laundry detergent, we'll make a game about fighting, scum enemies, and I think that it's fine if that works for you, great. But I think we'll start to see it become far more important into the mix, especially as the gaming audience continues to diversify, where we're seeing young females and older women becoming key gaming demographics. It's going to unlock so many more opportunities for us.
Exactly. Interesting also, we're talking about gaming. That obviously also indicates that you would need some level of speed in your connection to the internet.
Absolutely.
Chris, you're joining us today from a fibre to the premises household, which yesterday about this, I just said, I want to buy your house. And I think that's what I know. I want to talk about the NBN in the market a little bit more, because I don't think as an industry we're recognising that we are going to be hampered by the lack of speed in the Australian market due to some government issues. And indeed in MediaScope's newsletter today, I showed a really nice little graphic. I recommend, Chris, that you have a look at that shows the speed over the next 10 years of downloading one 22-minute episode of Parks and Recreation based on ADSL versus fibre to the node versus fibre to the premise. And my goodness, if that isn't a wake-up call for our industry, then I don't know what is. So I'm going to, again, talk about that a little bit more. But let's move on to my other bugbear for the week, media reform. How many times can they dangle that carrot in front of us, Chris? And here we go again. I mean, every time you think it's getting a little bit closer, it seems to be the government, their disarray gets in the way of something that our industry obviously needs. How it will manifest and how it will turn out, who knows? But that's certainly been something this week that's really piqued my interest. Again, I said that I attended the Programmatic Summit. 450 people, I think they got. So again, a really topical area that people really seem to want to get good information on and come together on. We spoke about things like ad fraud, ad blocking, viewability. So again, I think it's great that the industry is really talking about some of these issues. I think before we were in a little bit of denial. So we're going through, quite a typical disruption process. We're in denial. Now we're talking about the issue. Hopefully next there'll be some more solid solutions. Very excited. The other thing I just wanted to quickly touch on, this arrived on my doorstep during the week. So this is the 2016 Yellow Pages. Look how thin it is this year.
I know, that's massive. That's it's very surprising. Well, I guess it's not that surprising.
Well, I'm really surprised that it's still even in print form.
Yeah, I guess that's the most surprising part of it, right?
That is, it's getting thinner by the day, but even that, I mean, how many people would actually still refer to this? So my other thing of the week, and Chris, your week next week, how's that all shaping up?
I think that, next week, it's just going to continue to be exciting. I think we're beginning to look into some of our deep dives, as I was saying, from Media Futures. So we're going to be talking to some key agency leads, talking to some more of our media partners around how agencies are kind of working, that kind of agency of the future model starts to look. So, on top of everything else, that's what's keeping me busy and keeping me going.
Excellent. Well, that sounds like a really good. My mantra I'll lend to you is just turn up every day.
Yeah, and look, with how technology is today, even if you don't turn up, they'll find you. So it's better to just turn up in the first place.
Just surrender to it and give in. Look, thank you very much, and I should also say thank you very much to my very good friends at AdRoll today for the T-shirt that I'm wearing. AdRoll being a MediaScope partner, and I really thank them so much for their support. A busy week for me again next week, lots of meetings. I'm having a few good conversations with some people about skill shortages. So
Excellent.
Hopefully I'll be able to sort of make some good announcements on that in the coming few weeks. But yeah, turning up every day.
Great.
So look, thank you everyone so much for joining us this afternoon, and especially thank you to Chris. And we'll sign off now. Don't go, Chris. I'll stop the recording and then we'll say a proper goodbye. But thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you.